Good afternoon and welcome. Let me make the modifications here. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today on our new presentation of our virtual playhouse. We're very excited to present to you Matt Senie's Quakeress, which is a really unique and wonderful play, and it's very innovative, and it's a unique opportunity for us to try a few new things out here on our virtual playhouse. We would ask that you please sit back and enjoy this performance, pour yourselves a beverage, and bear with us because we are always trying to figure out some of the technical aspects of this. But we think this is going to be quite a bit of fun today. So please sit back, relax, and we'll be with you in just a moment as we get the show started. Alrighty, folks, and again, welcome to our presentation of Matt Senie's Quakeress, the first in our relaunch of our virtual playhouse. We're very excited that you folks have joined us today, and for those of you who are watching us as we live stream on YouTube, welcome, because it's also our first live stream on YouTube. We've actually made a transition over for those of you who have been watching us in the past on Facebook Live. We are now doing YouTube Live, which is something that we're having some fun experimenting with. For those of you who are interested after the performance today, a couple of the actors and the author will be with us for a talk back if you'd like to discuss that and you want to discuss a little bit about what it's like to shoot a play, and a wonderful original play in a virtual format using Zoom and using some of these templates that are available to you. It's going to be a very unique experience, I think, for all of you. We've done some of these shows, but nothing quite like this. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that you enjoy. If you like what you see, please consider making a donation. You can text the letters ETC, Eventide Theatre Company, ETC, to the number 44321, and you can make a secure donation from there. Everything you do to support what we do helps continue to support our mission, to support live and local theater, and also to continue promoting the arts. This has been a very difficult time for everybody these past few months, and the fact that we've been able to bring you the different and varied programming that we have so far has been exciting, and we look forward to bringing you more interesting and different programming as we move forward. So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Edwards. I'm the artistic director here at Eventide Theatre, and it's my pleasure to bring you Quakeress. The only thing I ask is you bear with me as I click a couple of buttons and get the performance ready to roll. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the end for our talk back. Thank you.
Quakers, Act 1, Scene 1. Year 1881. Interior, Helen and Peggy's dorm room at Newman College, University of Cambridge. Helen and Peggy each lay on their beds, Helen with a book open on her lap.
Do you imagine that Professor Appleton will retain his hair through his 50s?
There is little left, but what's there seems resilient. I don't think he's lost many strands since I arrived, though I suppose it has not even been 3 years.
I've noticed the same. It remains remarkably consistent, and there are fewer enough strands that if one were to fall out, I believe it would be noticeable. But it is as though whatever strands do fall out are immediately replaced by strands of equal length. Is this possible? How long should it take to grow out a new strand fully?
Too long? You're right. It would be noticeable if he was simultaneously losing and growing. There would be visible strands of unequal length, but he combs it straight down, and it is a perfectly picketed fence. The strands are all the same.
So you think he keeps the same strands all the time? He doesn't shed them even when he sleeps?
Perhaps he wears a cap at night and lays very still.
I've seen him ruffled by the wind. Why, just the other day he was walking across campus without any sort of covering in that vicious wind. Remember, it was so strong it knocked over 2 of the reading stalls by the cloisters.
I remember.
How did it cling to his head even then? I happened to be walking behind him, and I noted the way it whipped to and fro, at times almost streaming straight out behind him like some sort of head-billed dinosaur. Yet I think he himself was at more risk of being picked off and scattered along the grass than his hair.
Perhaps his roots are like those of trees. It is conceivable that the 70 or so strands that he still has are rooted deeply and widely in his head, perhaps underneath his skin. The roots of his hair branch out across his scalp. I mean, maybe even across the top and toward his face, or down the back of his neck, like trees whose roots sprawl hundreds of feet under the ground. Perhaps like little spiny glaciers, there's only the tip that is exposed.
The great wisping willows.
The edge of a once resplendent forest that is now in majority a barren desert of dimples and pimples and sun-baked bone.
That's why we women shed strands so frequently. A longer strand is like a taller tree, bending to a breeze and more easily uprooted.
I would imagine so, though we have far more strands to spare, and they repopulate just as quickly as they are detached.
A different type of resilience, I suppose.
Perhaps.
You like those dimples, don't you? I've seen the notes he writes on your papers. Signs them Hair A. Is that a nickname? He doesn't refer to himself that way with anyone else. Only you.
It's just his way of signing off to me, nothing particularly special about it.
His notes on your papers are also especially long. Never anything of the sort on mine.
Yes, well, I suppose we've developed an intellectual curiosity toward one another.
He knew of you before you arrived at the college. He'd heard of you. Even read 2 of your papers you wrote in Boston. He told me.
As I said, simply a curiosity about a future student. I'm sure he'd read some of your work as well.
He wanted to know what the first female PhD had to say about his field of study. Not as a future student, but as a colleague.
Hardly. Hair A, Professor Appleton, is a giant. The more I learn, the more his pupil and the less his colleague I become. He's simply trying to prepare me as thoroughly as possible for the typos. The exams are less than 3 months away, and I still have so far to go. I can't be distracted with thoughts of courtship or talk of forestry.
How can you not be distracted? What was it he wrote on your last paper? The one on Aristotle? That you could accomplish... what was it? That you could succeed when no one else had?
How many times must I tell you? Kindly stay out of my belongings.
That was it, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. And don't go sneaking into my desk anymore. I mean it. Have you been reading all of Hair A's comments while I am out?
Hair A? Who's that? I don't know any Hair A. That sounds like a special name for someone.
Oh, give it a rest, Peggy. He's tutoring me, that's all.
Then how come you were so quick to estimate the number of remaining strands on his head?
What?
70. You reckoned 70 strands with surprising confidence. Have you tallied them?
It was just a guess. You're the one who brought up the topic of his hair.
Come on, let's see the paper. What did he write? It's killing me that I can't remember it.
Peggy gets up and goes toward Helen's desk. Helen rises and stands in her way.
I think that's enough of your antics for this evening.
Come on, Helen, just give me one more look.
Peggy darts around Helen, who steps from side to side to guard her desk. Finally, Peggy wraps up Helen playfully and tickles her. Helen reacts and wriggles away, Peggy in pursuit. They end up on Helen's bed. Peggy tries to keep tickling her, and eventually, Helen hits her with a pillow. Peggy grabs the pillow and puts it over Helen's face, holding it there, pretending to smother her. Helen plays along and acts as though she's being slowly suffocated, dramatically clawing at Peggy. Helen eventually lies still.
Well, the deed is done. The great and famous Helen McGill is dead. No more studying, no more outperforming the men or correcting head teachers, and no more Hair A. Oh, how disappointed he will be to learn the fate of his beloved pupil. Okay, stop pretending to be dead. You've gotten so good at this creepy stillness, it's like you—
The great and famous Helen rises from the grave!
Ah, she's gotten me! I'm done for!
They pretend to struggle for a moment before they become still. Helen is lying right on top of Peggy and they look at one another, their faces very near. After a few moments, Peggy gently slips from under Helen's arm and off the bed, quickly opening Helen's desk and flipping through a few papers until she finds and pulls out the one she's looking for. Helen abruptly sits up on the bed.
Aha!
Hey, give that back!
Helen darts towards Peggy, who evades her, smiling and dancing around as she dodges. Peggy begins to sing the song Captain Jinx, while Helen keeps trying to get the paper. He turns the little chase into a dance, weaving around Helen in accordance with the lyrics. Finally, Helen gives up and Peggy turns to the back of Helen's essay where Appleton's comments are written.
Okay, let's see. Excellent, outstanding, excellent, very well argued. Ah, here we are, right at the end of his assessment. If you can write this, you could do what no one else has done. That doesn't sound like a tutor to me. That sounds like an admirer.
He exaggerates, simply hyperbole for the sake of compliment. There aren't a lot of women here studying ancient philosophy anyway. He just means I'm unique in that way.
He doesn't say that you're studying what few other women at Newnham are studying. He says that you could do what no one else has done. He's talking about the tripos. Most students here aren't even taking those exams, let alone prepare to score a first in them.
I wouldn't be the first person to score a first in the tripos.
Well, you'd certainly be the first from the women's college to do it. And you'd be set up for a career like no one else here could dream of.
I'm not concerned with all of that. I aim only to perform at my best and to fulfill with dignity and intelligence the values of my upbringing.
Do you think you could rehearse that line a little more? It's not quite believable just yet. I've seen the way you study, the way you push yourself. I've read what you write about the importance of co-education, of men and women learning and competing together. You've told me about the inquiries your father receives on your behalf, schools all over the country interested in retaining you before you've even gone back to the States, simply assuming that you will leave a historic mark wherever you go. You're leading the advance across the frontier, and I can see you'd rather die than follow a captain other than yourself.
You've trumped up a fanciful perspective, Peggy. My father built me as a pioneer, yes, but not a revolutionary. I have no aspiration to turn on their heads the roles of men nor women. If I may serve as an example of the value of the education of women, then I'll have succeeded in a crucial yet finally ancillary pursuit. Yes, scholarship is an unavoidable passion of mine, but it is a secondary of two. The first is serving God through a happy and proper marriage and bearing children who may outperform even me. This I consider my first ambition because, reason as I will, I find it lies nearest my heart, while scholarship seems a little cold compared with it.
Cold.
Coeducation is about equality of intellect, an aim whose fruition will bear steadier and holier relations between men and women. A woman trained in the virtue of labor, wary of the vice of indulgence, adept at the skills of handiwork, finance, and critical thought, this is the new American woman, unwilling to submit to the brutal, loveless marital arrangements of the past, and yet ready to fulfill her feminine role with expediency.
Feminine role. I've heard you bemoan many times the inherent cruelty of marriage.
Well, indeed, I often feel many types of marriage to be one of those remedies worse than the complaint. And in taking the dose, I should be extremely careful about who should administer it. But that it is inherently cruel, I've never claimed. I consider it a most excellent institution at its core. It still deserves to have ascribed to it the deepest moral and spiritual significance. A dutiful daughter, no less than a diligent woman, puts the good of the whole before that of the self. The natural desire for self-development must at some time be suppressed and an instinct for self-denial substituted for it. The vote, yes. Employment for women unable for or for some reason unwilling to marry, yes. But mainly, primarily an intellectual companionship with men that advances all of civilization. Not a new world, but a better one. Education is the light to guide and cheer our dark and toilsome way, to advance us within, not past the very mainspring of our being.
I don't believe you. Your words and actions seem unaligned. Your drive towards personal, even historic success here at Newnham is greater than you say. Satisfied with setting an example capable of being followed by others, by the average woman. It doesn't suit you. You can do what no one else has ever. Herr A believes it, and so do you. Your duty is to reject second best. Your toilsome way is not your place in the mass. It is singular and lonely.
I know you are wont to dramatize, Peggy. My only duty is to apply myself, to discover even a few square inches of that frontier, not to conquer it. Yes, I owe it to the honor of womanhood to give the old stubborn doors a knock. May be feeble, but even if it does not succeed, it may be one of the little waves which, you know, in time near smooth the hard rock. But this ambition is caged within familial allegiance, carrying on the noble work of my father in that small way of which I am capable, and to heed when I am called home to help with the work and with my sister's development, and ultimately to enter with dignity into a marriage wherein my intellectual faculties can be exercised alongside the fulfillment of my natural tasks. What's so funny?
Oh, nothing. Just the image of you setting your attention to natural tasks entered my head just now. Rather an absurd scene.
I've wasted too much time with you. I have to return to studying. Perhaps you should take a stroll in the orchard for a bit.
This is my room as well.
Well, I think it's best for one who wishes to learn to go a great deal alone.
End of Scene 1. Scene 2. Interior. Helen and Peggy's dorm room at Newman College, University of Cambridge. Peggy sits at her desk with an open book and paper for notes. After a few moments, Helen enters. She is in her nightgown, though it is daytime. She looks disheveled, too thin, and extremely tired.
Washroom, again? How many times can one splash cold water on one's face?
I do not believe there is a limit.
All that walking to and fro has by now, I'm sure, kept you from your desk the same amount of time as a good nap, which undoubtedly would accomplish more in the way of rejuvenation.
A nap would leave me groggy. I need a sharp, cold sting to refocus my attention.
What was the topic of the last line you read?
Well, I'm sure I knew it before you interrupted.
When was the last time you ate? Slept?
I begin the tripos in a matter of hours.
You will. You are studying yourself ill.
If only I had enough strength of purpose to study myself to death. Instead, I squander valuable minutes on novels instead of persevering through my Greek texts. What a thick-brained indulgence.
Helen, you've driven yourself without relent or reprieve. You're feverish and you can hardly see out of that eye.
Perfectly good health would only indicate a lack of effort. One does not study for the tripos in comfort and without an ache here and there. My health is as it should be.
I know you do not genuinely feel that way. You're concerned. I saw the prescription from the optometrist you went to see. Does he believe it to be an infection?
Stop snooping in my things, you devilish raccoon!
Stop inflicting ill health upon yourself. You complain of your struggle with examinations and essays, yet your high marks tell a different story. At first, I believed your symptoms of late to be a little innocent feint to cover your radiant satisfaction concerning some production which is to make the name of Helen McGill famous forever. A first position in the Tripos, a spectacular thesis presentation, and a prestigious teaching position. But your feint has deceived even you, and now your ailments have evaded your control of them.
Feint? You have no idea the strain put upon the mind and body by the tripos. You sit there preparing for the local examinations, 1/3 the length and 1/100th of the tripos depth. Meanwhile, I must overcome my own stupidity and fragility to even think of scoring adequately. And do you think I squander precious minutes trying to falsely convince you of my illness?
You strive for adequacy. What exactly would that resemble?
Do not reproach me for my dreadful ambition. I know it is within me, and yet my desire alone cannot necessarily give birth to the deed. The tripos are a beast, and to be mediocre, to be seated in the mean is to be devoured by it. The exams are by nature undane. I lose all self-confidence from the knowledge that the lesson is imperfectly prepared, and I hope only that I am man enough to represent my sex.
Such self-deprecation. Your respectable teaching position is already assured. Your father has secured several offers on your behalf. He sent word not 3 weeks ago. Why not return home and take up the position if you have already earned, if the alternative is such torture?
I told you to stop reading my letter
to me. No doubt you wanted to prove you had already mastered your studies, even before sitting the tripos.
Mastered? Mastered what exactly? Your snooping surely allowed you to see Professor Archerhin's comments on my most recent essay. I could see it actually pained him to read the horrid thing. I'm still very stupid in class and growing stupider and lazier every day. I have the same thing explained to me 17 times, and still the professor cannot whittle a concept down small enough to fit it in my head.
Oh, whoa. Ever since those comments on that single paper, you've dived into your illness and with this obsession with study. It was one assignment, particularly tough. Agamemnon. No one in the class received high marks on that.
The marks of others do not determine the level of the bar set for me. Especially when the other women here at Newnham seem like little girls. Nothing to do but go around and look at things, put little pieces of wood together, or play with dolls. No, there is no entertaining flight from this. There must be representatives who show the perseverance of the female scholar. That is what my family has prepared me for since birth. I cannot run away when I am able to fight, no matter how arduously, for the honor of my sex and country. And in the presence of such selfishness and unambition around me, there is no adequacy below the score of first. I shall either conquer gloriously or fail ignominiously in this battle of life.
Do you hear yourself? You may kill yourself in glory.
Duty is performed until from it one is parted by death. Besides, if this does not kill me, I believe it will make me stronger and better. More of a woman.
Helen allows herself to sink into Peggy's arms, and they collapse together onto Peggy's bed. Helen wraps her arms around Peggy and strokes her hair. Peggy lays on her back and seems only half focused on trying to comfort Helen. After a few moments, Peggy fully removes her arms from around Helen. Helen sits up slightly and looks at Peggy.
What's wrong, my love?
I'm trying to remember the last time I felt your fingers run through my hair. Since your descent into constant self-punishment, you only want me near you when you absolutely cannot continue to study. You wish for the ability to study yourself to death, or then you wish to die before squandering time spent with me. And yet, you feel yourself reach your limits. Eventually you must sleep, you must eat, you rest your eyes. And when you give in to those basic needs, you finally deign to look at me and anything more than an inferior distraction. Your duty to womanhood. Well, what about a duty to one woman in particular?
It isn't true.
Isn't it? I thought that perhaps after the tripos you would return to yourself, but I see that it isn't the tripos that drive your neglect. It isn't the tripos at work inside you. It is simply you. The way you orient yourself towards the world, and thus my place behind you and beneath your grand potentialities isn't a temporary one. It's where I've been living, and I see no sign of escape. I live in this room and so do you. I live in a dormitory with my bed and my desk and my books. You live in a lavish cell, jailer and prisoner. Do not lock me inside with you.
Please do not make your escape. Not right now.
When?
I need your grounding. I can't build sandcastles in the air. They all seem impossible and immediately tumble down before I've begun. Please. I must sit for the tripos this afternoon.
End of Scene 2. Scene 3. Interior. Helen and Peggy's dorm room at Newman College, University of Cambridge. Helen slouches, facing the wall. Peggy sits on her desk chair next to Helen's bed, holding a letter in her hand.
Helen? Helen, turn around. Your mother wrote again. She's concerned by your lack of response to her last letter, and she worries about your morbid condition. Helen, your family is not alarmed by the exam results half as much as they are by the change in you. Look here. Your mother says that your father has maintained your reputation at home. Americans don't know much about the tripos, and your father has assured your prescriptive employers that despite some ill health, you've done splendidly in ancient philosophy, which is true. They say they don't even need to mention the results in any other areas. Testimonials from your teachers will compensate for the lack of exam reports. Everything is in essence as it was before. From your father. You will honour your family and country in a responsible educational position at home, whether as educator or otherwise. He wishes to remind you that had he himself not forgone scholarship for a teaching and administration, he might not have accomplished half so much good in the world. You and he can continue on in advocacy of co-education in the States. That is the place and now is the time. Perhaps this is a blessing. Helen, your family duty has not been unfulfilled. I know your ambition runs deeper than this, but after all, this is a duty that you claimed was paramount. Here, listen to your mother's closing words. I am assured that some greater good will rise from the toppling ruins of this cherished ambition. For a girl whose cherished familial responsibility has not gone unmet, your despondence is extreme. One who is committed to achieving not some historic personal feat, but rather simply meeting an expectation within neatly and reasonably defined parameters, I would not expect someone like this to sink despairingly to such depths. Unless, of course, she were not honest with herself about what she truly desires. Unless she held much more affection for her independence than she let on. If a girl such as you claim to be emerged from the tripos with a reputation undamaged and her name listed alongside other pioneers of co-education, I would expect her satisfaction. Unless, finally, it were not her duty to her family nor to equal education, but rather to her own grandest potential prestige that she works so fervently to fulfill.
Perhaps it is true that my place in the tripos, kept relatively quiet and explained away, will half-truths and deflections will not adversely impact my reputation. But it ought to have crowned it. That is the thing. To be a true scholar, an ornament to my profession, would prevent me from having to pass through the fire again, no matter what discomfort may come next. Gold is tried and purified by the fire, but I am not gold. The black coal turns to ashes.
End of Act 1. Act 2, Scene 1. Year 1887. Interior. Living room in the Magil White household. Helen's husband Andrew sits in a large stuffed chair, smoking a pipe and reading. After a few moments, Helen enters. She is not obese, but has become noticeably heavier. She is all dressed up and holds behind her back a wrapped gift. She approaches Andrew and waits for him to acknowledge her. He finishes what he's reading, which takes several moments, before he finally closes his book and looks over at Helen for the first time. Helen smiles and takes another step forward.
How's the research coming, dear?
Dreadfully today. Nothing original left to be read. I only pray that there's something original left to say. You are dressed up.
Oh, thank you, darling.
There is a pause, a bit awkward. After a moment, Helen takes the gift from behind her back.
I've gotten you this.
What is it?
Open it. It's the latest chapter draft of your book with full edits and comments written opposite each page. I finished it last night.
There's quite a lot of commentary. I didn't realize that you held such expertise on the roots of the Reformation. One might surmise by the volume of your words that I am either misinformed in my research or I have left out much crucial detail.
Oh, of course, neither is the case. It was simply my wish to respond thoroughly to your assertions in such a way as a colleague might, such that you may anticipate rebuttals or critiques. But certainly, I include my admirations and agreements as well, which you're sure to receive plenty also. It was only meant to be of assistance.
I was expecting this chapter proofread 2 days ago. I have delayed work on the next pending satisfaction with the organization of this one. As I told you, I wish only to know whether this chapter felt overflown with content, such that some should be placed in the following. I have spent 2 days reading the superfluous analysis of others simply to pass the time.
Apologies, Andrew. I didn't realize that your continued work depended upon my editing.
Does not depend upon your editing. I simply didn't want to continue writing if there were a chance that much would have to be redone if I could avoid it. Now, how am I to find in all of this the little that I actually require to know?
Well, I can tell you the places where I felt that the content deviated from the scope of the chapter and seemed better suited for a place either in the following or preceding.
You suggest that I move some of this into the previous chapter. I thought you said that all the chapters have thus far been satisfactorily organized.
They have, but that does not mean that there is only one way to organize a chapter. You've added content in this current chapter that would fit more appropriately in the previous one. I couldn't factor this new content into my evaluation of the structure of the previous chapter because I did not then know you were planning to write it.
The previous chapters are solidified. I'm not making changes to them now.
Nor do you need to, necessarily. You could just as effectively place the content in a subsequent chapter.
Fine. We shall discuss the structure tonight, and I'll begin again in the morning.
Helen remains where she is.
What is it, Helen?
I left an inscription on the final page of the chapter.
It's a very thoughtful anniversary gift. Thank you, Helen.
Of course, darling.
Helen lingers for a moment before turning to exit. Just before she reaches the door, Andrew calls.
Helen?
Yes?
As it turns out, I hadn't forgotten. I had something in mind for you as well. I simply didn't mention it.
Oh, what was it?
Well, I recently resumed my correspondence with Leland Stanford. I inquired about the open positions at the university, and he said that he was in need of a professor of Greek. And one of the usual professors is on sabbatical for 2 years, so the position is temporary, but it is a prestigious one and could easily lead to other offers.
Really, Leland Stanford?
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted me.
He didn't guarantee it, but he said that based on your reputation and letters of reference, he would seriously consider you.
You sent my reference letters as well. Oh, Andrew, thank you.
I am sensitive to more than you think. And I know that you wish to have recognition of your intellectual capabilities. A positive response from Leland ought to elevate your self-estimation.
How exciting. Thank you, Andrew, really. I feel so foolish for thinking that you could never see me as an intellectual, let alone a peer. But this, what a sublime expression, Andrew.
Indeed. Of course, after even a little bit of thought, one can plainly see that taking on such an appointment is out of the question. But how many women in your circle can say that they were considered for the position?
Out of the question.
Well, yes, of course. California is far too distant, and 2 years apart is not tenable. You're needed here in the house.
But you sent my letters of reference.
And Leland saw how easily qualified you would be as a candidate.
Well, if I am qualified as a candidate, shouldn't we at least explore his potential offer? Can it not be considered?
I could not get along with you gone for that length of time. There is far too much to be done in the house, and besides, I would miss you terribly. You see that selfishness, after all, moves the world. What would have become of my love for you if I were willing to part with you for such a length of time? Really, my forbiddance is my second gift.
Giving and then rescinding a gift is far from gifting twice. Andrew, I have been studying personal finance and household economics, future planning even. I could continue these studies in California and be of enormously increased value in the house when I return.
Finance. You have been learning how to handle money.
As I see it, that is an essential part of a wife's duty. Keeping track of the amounts and managing the budget planning and analyzing investment options leaves a husband to his work, eliminates distractions. Being an intellectual partner does not compromise my ability to fulfill my wifely duties. In fact, they enhance one another.
Such a partnership lacks usefulness. I need a proofreader, not a reviewer. Besides, it is one thing to devote a bit of time here and there to intellectual work. In fact, how else are you to remain sharp enough to understand my work? But to try and reignite your efforts pertaining to education is another thing entirely. These are the efforts of a past life, and that is where they belong.
Andrew, I spent 6 years as a teacher, a principal, a professor, a trustee, and even a founder at 5 different schools, right up until I decided to marry you. My intellectual capacities are not a trivial fancy. I can partner with you on your work, your financial investment, and even your political ambitions. I don't deign to claim an equal stature or superior knowledge in any of these fields, but I should be considered an asset, not a liability. 6 years, Andrew. For 6 years, I dedicated night and day to advocacy for co-education, for quality education, and underperforming.
I heard you the first time, Helen. And yes, I'm well aware of your co-educational crusades. But I seem to remember those years being spent at less than prestigious institutions. Do not confuse a penchant for Greek and philosophy with an exemption from wifely duties.
You question my dedication to wifely duty? Were you there when I battled my way through the most difficult exams in higher education, exams that you never even considered attempting? Were you there when I single-handedly founded a school, filled it with students, and with a staff of only 6 offered the most rigorous education in the region? Did you watch as I suffered through 20-hour days to become the most respected principal and most effective teacher at a preparatory school, the majority of whose board didn't even favor the inclusion of women? How dare you characterize my past life as anything but an undying devotion to a noble cause? Does that not sound like a person who may have something of value to contribute? You shall likely become the next ambassador to Germany soon, Andrew, and like it or not, my role within this household will change. I can be an advisor of sorts rather than keeper of the dustpan. There will be much to keep track of and much to decide upon. I cannot fathom your doubt of either my dedication or my competence.
Indeed, indeed. I shall soon take on the role of ambassador, and indeed, your role shall change. You will no longer be the one to sweep the chimney, but neither will you be the one to draw up the conditions of treaties, nor establish novel diplomatic relations with global consequences. Surely, we will both be ambassadors. but I shall be the political ambassador, and you shall be the social ambassador for the wives and servants of our visitors and allies. Do not be fooled into thinking that both of these positions amount to real intellectual work. Besides, your tone of voice demonstrates my persisting concern. Your hysterics are certainly not befitting of a future ambassador's wife. A single misstep from this household and my position may be compromised.
Hysterics, of course. I have never had hysterics. Oh, I hate when you imply that.
All I am implying is that you can be prone to whatever you like to call it, and that any insubordination that results therefrom can be just as damaging as the illness itself.
When have I suggested any inclination toward insubordination? When have I displayed anything other than absolute devotion to my husband and the duties required of his wife? How explicitly must I say it? I will go where you wish and stay where you wish and do what you wish during your pleasure. Now, are you satisfied with your taming of the shrew?
I will not sink any lower by continuing this discussion. I am not about to allow my wife to neglect her duties in service of irrationality, and that is the end of it.
As usual, your stubbornness boils down to the perceived irrationality of woman. Never can you find arguments enough to sustain any such thesis. But let me hear them, such as they are. I am quite unprejudiced and prepared to receive them with all of the respect they merit. Even bad arguments employed in a bad cause will be received with that respect, which I always think right to show arguments, or what considers themselves such. There is nothing bigoted about me.
Helen, you are about to hold the large and important role for which you are indeed eminently in line. You will have to rid your thoughts of this fanciful balance of power and commit yourself fully to the realities of that role, including not only the grace and neutrality that imbue a household with the quality of the benign, but also the physical appearance that reassures the uncertain visitor that they are in an environment amenable to diplomatic discussion and resolution. To this last especially, you cannot turn a blind eye, and particularly now, as the time of your new position is likely to approach at a steady clip.
I have no illusions or desires regarding any dynamic that resembles a balance. I already do so much for you. Perhaps it is selfish, but even an iota of intellectual recognition and reciprocity would ease the burden of this cumbersome, if ultimately justified, imbalance.
Here I sit, prepared to read your plethora of comments on my work, simply because you took the time to write them, and I am prevented from doing so only by the continuation of this conversation about my lack of recognition of your intellect. Well, yes, Ellen, I recognize it. It is all around me. And unless I were to go completely blind and deaf, I could never help but recognize it. You are indeed a wunderkind, able to drop into Greek, Latin, French, German, English, American, and Quaker at your own sweet will. And yet I wonder at the whereabouts of that serene little Quaker woman whom I had imagined, the Platonist, rising quietly above earthly trials and troubles, the gentle, broad-browed seeress. Was she then a figment of my brain?
I do not deny the importance of the social and physical requirements of the role, and neither will I neglect my duty to fulfill these requirements, even if recognition and gratitude cannot be offered me as some small compensation. All I ask in that case is for the time and resources to find my way into costume and character.
End of Scene 1. Scene 2. Stage right. Interior. Andrew and Helen's home in Germany. Stage left. Fitness room and sanatorium. Andrew is standing in front of a mirror, getting dressed. He begins in his underwear and meticulously dons clothing befitting a diplomat, almost as a uniform. The process is slow and deliberate. He takes a few tries to get his tie just right, attaches brooches to his chest, indicating his position, etc. He watches himself in the mirror the whole time. A fancy dress hangs next to him. When he finishes dressing, he lightly fingers the material of the dress, making sure it is hanging straight before he exits. While this is happening stage right, Helen is stage left in the fitness room. She is exercising with extreme vigor. The routine does not look pleasant, and she's clearly suffering as she completes the activities. She performs a variety of exercises both with and without equipment. She sweats and groans and strains throughout the routine, her voice almost rising to a yell at times. After Andrew exits, Helen continues to exercise for a few moments before collapsing onto the floor, struggling to catch her breath. Helen's panting can still be heard for a moment after the lights fade out over her. End of scene 2. Scene 3. Interior. Andrew and Ellen's home in Germany. Andrew wears the clothes that he was putting on in the previous scene, and Helen wears the dress that hung next to him in the mirror. Helen and Andrew sit at opposite ends of an ornately set table that is covered in about a dozen used sets of dishes. It is clear that a lavish meal has just ended, and the guests have left. Helen and Andrew sit silently for a spell, their expressions solemn.
I meant only to remind you of some of the conditions of the proposed agreement that you had neglected to mention to the Kaiser.
There's a difference between neglecting to mention and awaiting the proper moment to them.
But we had talked about it beforehand, darling. Your plan was to lay out all of the president's conditions at once in order to maintain an image of straightforwardness.
Well, perhaps I decided during the course of the conversation that there would in fact be a more optimal time to fully explicate some of those terms, as I got the sense that the Kaiser felt he was being dictated to rather than cooperated with. And I wanted to make sure that he remained cordially engaged with what I had to present to him.
He did remain so engaged even after the last elements of the proposal had been presented. Not once did he seem put off by the volume of the president's requests.
He appeared to remain so engaged. Who is to say whether he departed here without a sour taste in his mouth? I suppose you are clairvoyant and could foresee the result of what you said, or perhaps you have been masterfully trained in diplomacy without my knowledge. Which should I take to be the case?
Darling, the Kaiser was thrilled with the agreement in the end, and the president will be equally thrilled when he receives your report. You are the one who achieved the success. You are the ambassador. I simply meant to support you in your role.
Your task is to support me within the bounds of your role, to charm and entertain the guests, to sparkle with conversation, and to impress our visitors with my ability to cultivate such a wife.
Do I not fulfill this role to an extent even greater than what would be considered adequate? You seem to know all of the people in the world worth knowing, and we both endure an endless rash of giving and receiving entertainment. The hurly-burly of politics is not where my strength, nor even my interest lies, but I am ready for any decision. I live for you now. Your good is mine, and I offer what I can in your chosen and assigned field. Thoroughness, clarity, and reason.
How often such offerings appear to me no more than a slow turn of mind and willingness to linger over detail. The Kaiser's impatience with your roundabout interjections was palpable. And in such a situation, what choice do I have but acquiescence for the sake of peace? Yet, your intractability almost borders on sedition. In families, as in the dealings of nations, sovereignty must remain indivisible.
You speak as though I offer nothing but insurgency regarding your diplomatic post, but it is not so. Are my small infractions toward your sovereign reign not outweighed by all that I do to maintain the order and appearance of the White household?
Outweighed by what? Exactly. You claim my good is yours, and yet signs of your selfishness can be detected everywhere. You rarely meet me for breakfast. You do not keep an appointment book. You do not keep track of expenses. And even after all the time spent in the sanatorium, you still do not take regular exercise to keep down your flesh. Especially since the birth of the children.
For heaven's sake, Andrew. In all things, I only try to please you and perform my wifely duty. I give regular, minute, and conscientious attention to financial matters, and I keep not one, but 2 memorandum books for appointments. Where do you think I go off to in the evenings? I am in my study, recording and filing. Of course, I regret that it is impossible on many occasions to join you for breakfast, but you must plainly know that household chores and social calls keep me busy nearly every second of the day, not spent in service of supporting your position. Besides, sleep itself is a duty more important than the pleasure of your company, for you would suffer most of all if my health were to give out. And as for exercise, despite the rarity of a moment unfulfilled with responsibility, I do take long walks, often with you.
It is this foolish Quaker ferocity that I could plainly see in our young Hilda's savage temper, trying for nothing, clawing out for affection and attention as though her very presence were a martyrdom for our greater good. The pair of you were 2 toddlers with identical behavior, yet one gave birth to the other. It seems you both will remain petulant children forever.
How dare you insult the memory of your own progeny and my devotion as well in the same breath? All that kept me from leaping to join little Hilda in the other life was my duty to you. Perhaps now what stays my fate is devotion to our young Karen instead. Second daughter cannot remedy the loss of a firstborn. As long as I live, I shall never be happy again. Never will my suffering cease. Never again will I have the same bright hopes for a child. My relation to the things of this world will never become unaltered. The duty to my surviving blood perhaps transcends my despair, for I believe I could kill Karen with my own 2 hands rather than let her be dependent on anybody who would merely tolerate her and very likely misunderstand and despise her, and who will dislike and get rid of her in any way they can if she seems likely to cause them the least trouble.
You depict me as the most monstrous companion. And yet here you sit, unmoved.
The bond of marriage is not dissolved in separation. It is fixed and outlasts love.
End of Act 2. Act 3. Scene 1. Interior. Helen and Andrew's home in Germany. Andrew sits in a large stuffed chair reading a book and smoking a pipe. He is about 10 years older than he was in the previous scene. Someone can be heard off stage practicing the piano. They are playing well, but each time there is a slight misstep, the entire piece is started over again. The repetition is very irritating. After several moments of this, Andrew shuts his book aggressively.
The piano?
Will you have her cease this insufferable ritual?
The piano?
Yes, the piano. What else? I cannot even hear myself think.
Repetition is the only way for her to learn. She knows she's to start over completely each time she misses a note.
Perhaps I could abide such a strategy if she could manage more than 7 consecutive notes without a misstep.
We'll wait until you hear the final product. Perhaps you'll think it worthwhile when there are no missteps.
I doubt whether I will live that long. If she can't reach the second movement by tomorrow, I may find myself disinheriting her.
Don't joke like that.
At the very least, I won't be leaving her the piano. I have a feeling those notes can pierce coffin walls.
I've had enough of this. Perhaps if you took even a moment of your time to mentor her, she could learn more quickly. I don't recall you sitting at the bench with her a single time.
Karen, dear.
The piano stops. A moment later, Karen enters.
Yes, Father?
You know, I was just thinking, you seemed cooped up lately. Are you not in the mood to get a little fresh air? Perhaps a stroll down to the market would do you good.
It is raining, Father.
A little rain never hurts. It's good for the bones. Have Maria accompany you with the umbrella.
It is raining quite hard.
Even better for the bones, then.
Well, perhaps, though I haven't finished my practice.
Nah, that can wait for later. Anyway, a good walk clears the head. Your playing will sound even more lovely afterward.
Well, if you insist, I suppose I can end early today.
Excellent.
Yes, excellent.
Excellent.
Make sure the walk is a brisk one in order to keep the blood flowing. That will help with your posture and dexterity. Then we can extend your practice time tomorrow.
What is the matter with my posture? Do I not sit at the bench exactly as you've instructed?
No matter. The point is to get out of the stuffy indoors for a little bit.
Of course, but the improved posture is surely a wonderful benefit.
I don't believe my posture to be in need of benefit. I have been at that bench all day and my back has not arced once.
Darling, it's okay to pursue a little artificial advantage here and there. If a brisk walk will rejuvenate you, then certainly that's what's in order.
I need no artificial advantage.
I never said you did, but since you're taking a break from practicing anyway.
I didn't take a break. I was called for.
Well, in any case, a walk would do you good.
Well, I don't want to take one. It is raining and I'm wearing one of my nice dresses.
Simply have Maria assist you in changing into a more comfortable attire.
Then I will have to change again after the walk. It would be an inconvenience.
Nonsense! It is worth the time and inconvenience if it helps you progress in your musical skill.
It won't help me progress. I don't need to take a walk, nor do I feel like doing so.
I really think it would do you good, regardless of its impact on your posture. Just take a walk. You must get out of the house and stretch your legs now and then.
I agree, but of course there's always room to make improvements in any area, even for those with the most practiced posture.
Helen, for goodness sake.
This conversation is tiresome. I don't need a rainy walk to maintain my posture. I prefer to stay inside, and that's the end of it.
I think I'll take a little stroll in that case. Maria, I need the umbrella.
Karen, darling, have you finished your Italian lessons?
You told me that it was past time to begin piano practice.
So you left your Italian incomplete?
It isn't incomplete. I just didn't have time to finish it.
So it is incomplete then?
It isn't finished, but not because I chose not to finish it. I will do it. I just didn't have time before beginning my piano practice.
You began your Italian lesson at 8 this morning. You've had more than adequate time. What were you doing for so long?
I was working on Italian. It is laborious.
I know it is not laborious enough for you to take that it should remain incomplete after such a lengthy amount of time afforded to complete it.
Perhaps it would not be for you, but I find the grammar difficult. So often I spend an hour looking at the pages, and yet I absorb nearly nothing.
You're not trying to absorb it.
I am. Why should I spend any longer studying it than absolutely necessary? I assure you, if I were at all adept, I would be thrilled to finish the lesson quickly.
I said the same thing when I was your age. I felt I simply could not get the material to sit still in my brain, but in reality, I was usually allowing myself to be distracted. If I could do the lessons all over again, I would not encounter the same problem.
Why don't you do it then? And I'll return to the language when I've grown elderly.
Excuse me? That is it. Perhaps if you were not so flippant, you could apply yourself to accomplishing more than an irritating sarcasm. I'm giving you double red marks for this morning. Hopefully you can redeem yourself this afternoon, or else I shall have to award you the same grades.
Oh no! Double red? What am I to do? What will the punishment be this time? A nasty look, silence at dinner, or will you completely forget like last time and accidentally gift me an expensive scarf?
I am warning you. Your insolence goes too far. You'll spend the rest of the afternoon practicing your Italian, and after dinner, you'll work at sewing right up until bedtime.
Sewing? When is the last time that skill was required in this house by anyone other than the help?
Karen, you are 17. The help is my help, not yours. A wife must be proficient in basic housework skills as well as intellectual endeavors.
Then how come Father does not put these same demands upon me? He does not seem to think them particularly crucial for my future.
Your father does not occupy himself with the quality of your future life. I am the only one devoted to making sure that you are adequately equipped to enter the world.
And yet, I struggle to discern when, according to your most caring and thorough efforts, I am actually expected to enter it. At least Father respects my independence enough to leave me be.
Oh, is that what he does? Is that what silence really is? Is that the definition of neglect? Respect for your independence? Karen, you have no independence. Your life is characterized at its core by dependence, and you would not take responsibility for it even if given the chance.
I would! You simply derive too much pleasure from controlling every aspect of my being. I cannot even receive a letter without your interception and thorough inspection.
Pleasure! You think it is pleasurable for me to be consumed in every moment by my duty to try and guide a stubborn mule towards a proper mode of living? You believe this to be my source of happiness? No, a mother lives not for herself but for her children. It is not absolutely necessary that we should be happy, but it is laid upon us to live holy and thoughtful and trusting lives. For me, that means attempting with every fiber of my being to mold you into something better than the purposeless existence of a worldly and self-willed and self-seeking woman. Do not fool yourself into believing that it is my independence that suppresses yours, for I have none either. All I can do is persist in my parental duty, even if it appears increasingly clear that I am a martyr to a lost cause.
Drop the virtuous martyr act, Mother. Your ardor is simply the desire to make me in your own image.
It is my responsibility to do what is best for my child, and though you may be too young and myopic to see it now, I am sparing you great pain. An old maid still is, I fancy, a failure even greater than an unhappy wife. No matter how intense the sting of loneliness within marriage, it is bliss compared with the arduousness and shame of actual solitude. The heart of God is forgiving, but his eyes still judge what is and is not natural.
Oh, why must it always come down to this? I have told you, I do not believe in those legends about everlasting burning. You are incapable of shaking off prejudice and preconceived plans, incapable of seeing. Why not leave me to work out my own salvation or damnation? If it is hellfire I'm headed for, why at least let me go and not be graded.
Let you go. You couldn't possibly, even if I ungripped you. You are adhered whether you wish to admit it or not. You're a dependent who cannot leave, who cannot call her soul or her purse her own.
If this is the case, then with whom does the fault lie? It is not within the world, but rather within the walls of this house that I have learned that I am good for nothing in particular. That I have been made untrained, unmastered, and headstrong, an anchorless, rudderless craft. I have been made all of the things that you despise in yourself, that have kept you from seeing life's options as anything more than dreary on one side and horrid on the other. If God's eyes judge what is unnatural, then surely they fix upon a daughter's hatred of her own mother. But it is you who has instilled in me a cold and suspicious temperament, you who has set me on the path towards spinsterhood. I shan't marry. I should be most wretched, and so would he.
Perhaps your father's suggestion was apt.
I do not wish to take a walk.
Not that. His suggestion that you be sent to live with Aunt Beatrice for a spell. Seems that I am, after all, failing to instill in you an appreciation of the law of duty and to develop your affectional nature. I may be unable to endure the stabs of indifference without losing track of these qualities in myself.
This was Father's suggestion.
Beatrice may have better luck in matching you with a suitable husband.
Mother, I wish to sweep the cobwebs from my brain. I do not want to marry. because I have nothing better to do.
I cannot in my heart contradict what I still wish to impress upon you regarding the realities of life. Nor can I bring myself to lament the methods through which I have tried to bring you up. I would not undo any of it, for I remain firm in my commitments and convictions. But I have myself been an old maid with much satisfaction to the age of 36 when I joined with your father. I have lived both sides of this life, the dreary and the hard. And it is my sincere belief that I have offered you the most useful pieces of this experience. That my preference for your marriage comes from a place of earnest care. I believe it to be true that you should marry, and that ultimately you should do so because you have nothing better to do. Yet I also cannot say that my wish for you is to enter into marriage without careful evaluation and selection. Perhaps what I would hate in my heart above all is for you to marry only in order to have children. For to do so, except as a result of an ideal relation, is to do them a great injustice. We cannot always know when we're doing this, but we can at least make sure that our own contribution is as nearly genuine devotion as possible. So many relations prove so different from what one or the other or both of the parties expect, and the self-control and delicacy which should make it possible for such unions to have any results are quite lacking in most men from their utterly incorrect early training. Perhaps the world would be but sparsely populated if it were not so. The race would be a noble one.
Karen exits. After a few moments, the piano is heard again. The same piece with the same mistakes. Karen starts over each time she misses a note. End of scene 1. Scene 2. Interior. Helen and Andrew's home, Ithaca, New York. Andrew, 86 years old, lies on his deathbed. Helen, 65, sits next to him. She tends to him, applying cool washcloths, massaging his arms and hands, adjusting his pillows and blankets.
How is your head?
It pains me.
Where?
In the back. And a bit on the side.
This side?
And the other.
Helen massages Andrew's head and continues to press a damp cloth to it.
I dreamt again of Mary last night.
Oh.
I found myself standing in a room face to face with her, happy, smiling, sweet. She flung her arms around my neck, and although I knew even in the dream that she was not living, she seemed perfectly natural. Her cheek pressed close to mine was cold as on that June morning. And yet she was not dead in the usual sense. I was, for a moment, infinitely happy at the sight of her happy face. And I remember no more. How young and inexperienced I was then. Fleeting our time together. And yet how utterly satisfying my marriage to her. I suppose our life together existed fully within that period before the heaviest of life's realities set in. what I would not give for one more glance in the direction of her sweet movements.
My Andrew, you remain stubborn. Even in the face of death, you allow that same heaviness to prevent you from believing that such a glance is possible.
I have spent my life by necessity in the world of reason. I have spent it relying on logic, and in my academic life, I have even spent it actively demystifying the religious orientation. After the pain of realizing that Mary was not simply my wife, but would rather be relegated to the status of my first wife, I had never expected happiness. Hardly dare think of it, though. There is one happiness I pray for every night of my life. That is not what is called salvation. If my soul is worth saving, it will probably be saved. If not, I don't know that I care for it. It should be blissful to think that Mary's soul can be spoken of in terms of whereabouts, that my dear one's soul did not cease alongside the beating of her heart. But on this point, my mind remains wretchedly clouded by doubts, by great thicknesses of doubts. My faith in a continued existence is weak and flickering. Finally, I find myself afraid, Helen. And yet for years I have watched you, admittedly at times with envy, persist in your conviction, dodging inconsistencies and supposedly reconciling your powers of reason with your Quaker intuition. Do you truly go confidently toward the end? Do you predict for your soul a reward? Have you lived to deserve one?
There was admittedly a time, so long ago it seems prehistoric, when I wondered why the pictures hung on the walls, why we ate with spoons. The blue sky above seemed a strange mockery. Perhaps it should have been the strength of my intuition that confirmed my belief, but it was not. Rather, it was the absurdity of this futile existence. It was the mockery that our life here necessarily seems without confidence in the hereafter. If everything were fleeting, I could scarcely contemplate the prospect of adding 0 to 0 in the vain hope of making a sum. It was in Cambridge, on a dull little street, on a dull evening alone, that I saw the divine spirit in the world around me and understood that true life is to live in and for all things through him. While death is the eternal life that removes self-consciousness, leaving only enough self to look out with love into the wholeness of things. The thing itself was not words, nor exactly thought. It was a vision, an insight. I believe in it as much as I do in my own life. In that inexhaustible spring of patience and hope, I accept the pain as well as the joy of life. Where does it hurt?
My lip.
I will rub it. Sincerely, I wish you could believe as strongly as I that in heaven you will take Mary's hand instead of letting it go. And that instead of a passage from light and love to darkness and separation, it will be the other way. Loved ones are nearer to us than we often think. Mary is not far away. Try to believe it and spare no effort which shall help you realize it. See it in the permanency of all that is true and beautiful and good, in the peace that passes understanding. It is only this larger hope that can save you from that terrible thickness of doubt, the only real death, the enemy of all true life, whether here or hereafter. This is the hope that must persist even when his face seems turned away to the outward part of our being, and nothing remains to us but that pure spiritual communion to which neither mind nor sense give any access.
You appear to me, even now, as a stubborn bull, uncompromising and disobedient, and in many ways a hypocrite. You are all of the things that you professed, and I think genuinely always wished you would never be. You have made me unhappy, and I think reminded me in almost everything you've done, in everything you've said, in every glance you've thrown, that you are not Mary. You do not have her gentleness, nor her acumen, nor her love. Yet in this moment, you are revealed as a bishop in the true apostolic succession. Where inside you does this singular unselfishness reside, so different from the rest of you? Why do you endeavor so to confirm me in faith and in the belief in a reunion with a wife beside whom you will always fall short? Why do you dab soothingly at the pains of a husband whose eternal love belongs to another?
Your reunion with Mary does not negate my own place nor peace in the hereafter. My failures and lapses will not prevent my own reunion with my mother, with Hilda, with Karen, nor even with you. I do not expect to fade away like a morning cloud into the infinite blue of the past. I have faithfully poured myself into the duties of a student, a pioneer, a wife, a mother, a woman. That I am not loved in return does not mean my damnation. It is now toward Christ alone that I can direct my service. A friend of man, himself a man, yet living in that perfect spiritual union with God, which is the destiny of all men to obtain. He is the last one I can find to whom there is a duty to be performed. His reciprocation will be a dignity that I shall at last find in the hereafter. Thus I do not soothe the body of my husband, I soothe the soul of a dying man, who through Christ is owed one final act of mercy.
How do you bear the weight of being no more than second best in all things in this world?
How could God love all things and let them prey upon each other? Finite mind cannot comprehend such things.
End of scene 2. Scene 3. Helen's garden, stage left. Stage right is in darkness. There are a few beds of springtime flowers contained within wooden perimeters. Helen is meticulously weeding, trimming, and watering.
Desultory life, with all the interruptions of a feminine existence, is certainly a thing of shreds and patches, full of motion, sound, and sometimes fury, but it signifies little. And so the beautiful, or the best expression of what one is one of the principal things we live for. Worth is measured by the depth of love received. My garden often seems parched, like the heart of a wife and mother deserted, scholar with mind ignored, an apostle evidently unworthy of a sign, any recognition of her piety. And yet, perhaps it is only such neglect that grants one the patience to wait 5 years for small tulips to bloom. Andrew would certainly say life is not long enough. The garden offers the reward for patience and diligence that humans and even perhaps gods do not. In response to concerted cultivation, flowers finally provide tangible proofs of gratitude and affection. I have been schooled by life to work on in the face of failure, and I am glad. In the midst of what seems something of a wreck in other directions, to engage in worthwhile activity, even in one small particular. An activity is something everyone must have. One could hardly think that keeping a clean house and providing comfortable eating would be the sum of my mental activity. My final trip before the strain became too much was through Homer, New York, the birthplace of my late Andrew. I imagined him as a little boy there and was struck suddenly with the recognition that I do not know where he is in the universe. Felt that strangeness, that unreality that's drifted around me since his death. I assured him long ago of his reunion with Mary, yet without compromising the belief in my own reunion with him, in the hope that in death I might yet earn a place by his side. Was this correct? Should I rather expect to be eternally alone? A natural continuation from one life to the next, I suppose. It is curious what we naturally include and omit in the stories of ourselves. Whether reflecting from the end upon the beginning and the middle, or desiring to explain ourselves to posterity, certain details seem to be ejected for lack of space. Or else there are inner workings that edit on our behalf the order and significance of events. When, other than in this garden, where my mind wanders unsteered, do the neglected details of a life seep into the forefront of thought? From a principal in Johnstown to a schoolmaster in West Bridgewater, to a teacher in New Jersey and then Brooklyn, having birthed a second daughter dead before 2 years old. Seeing a stepson sink deeper and deeper until he decides that he'd rather be anywhere other than this world. Watching a sister's mind evolve into a state of delusion, only contort further with each psychiatric treatment. Where do we keep these extra details that don't quite seem to fit in with our stories? Does their absence reveal their painful significance, or rather the ugliness of their easy triviality? I have, however, found some other ways of keeping busy. I've resumed Greek classes at Sage College, as well as one on Dante, and even a dance class, though I can hardly perform the movements. What I find more meaningful still is my attachment to the students at Sage. I serve as patroness at dances and concerts, attend afternoon sewing circles, and join in literature readings. At all official receptions, the students insist on my presence. No woman has ever been to the young woman what I have. I will look out for the girls anyway, even if no one else does. But I am not naive. I understand that it is too late for me to alter the way I exist in relation to others, the way I am seen and the role that I play. An unbridgeable gap exists, and I hope that I am finally accepting of its presence. Probably many people have no idea what this means to me, to have no close companionship. My mind is active, but my heart shivers. Sisters are not to me what I am to them or would be. And friends are many and kind, but I want closer companionship, both giving and taking. If I did not give out a great deal, I should freeze to death inwardly. But I find comfort in thinking all I can about anyone whom I can help. Giving things is not the best of life, but it is better than nothing. That is all that is wanted. Yes. The garden seems parched whether the day is wet or dry, but it struggles still to make some cheerful show of geraniums and the hardier blooms.
Helen exits stage left. As she exits, Karen appears stage right, now middle-aged. 3 tombstones stand in a line, 2 right next to one another and a third furthest away. Karen walks to the third and stands in front of it.
What is a woman to do? One who has surrendered so many ambitions, subordinated so many rights of independence. What is she to do but cling fiercely to and fight viciously for what remains hers, if for no reason at all other than that these things may be called hers? The lock on the bathroom door was one of Mother's most prized possessions. I scarcely remember a bath taken without altercation. Hot water baths, the dreaded extravagance of women. I tried to be clever, sitting by the heater in the next room, guarding it from her until the tub was full. My blood boiled on the occasion that she allowed the tub to fill without a fuss before sprinting into the bathroom ahead of me and taking my bath herself. And then the frightful occasion on which Aunt Beatrice and I rushed across Paris to Helen's side after receiving word that she was dying, only to find her trying on new dresses in the parlor. It wasn't a lie. I was dying. Of course I was. My sister has deserted me. She's left me here alone, when I am dying. It's her duty to stop amusing herself and come back and give me loving service when I am dying. Dressmakers? But I needed clothes. I'm in rags. We might meet people we know. Her brand of love made her impossible to live with, if one were anything short of a saint or a doormat, and I was neither. The kind of love that was always angrily, jealously counting returns and finding them not up to its deserts. I suppose I must admit that with moderate regularity, I enjoyed her company. Such a force she was. Between fights, I found myself in admiration, even in awe of her vitality, her will, her wit, her outlandish fervor, which she enjoyed, and she enjoyed a lot of things. She enjoyed like a child at the circus. She could suddenly come out with half a dozen words, exactly the right ones, that got it so neatly in the solar plexus once and for all that those who'd been bored or angry or embarrassed collapsed in shouts of laughter. She could puncture a certain type of insolent rudeness with a tongue like a rapier in a master fencer's hand and hold him up spitted and squirming. She could and did talk about anything and everything. I learned from her how to shun society, and our moments of peace together were a shared loneliness. And yet, we were two cats tied up in one sack, a series of cataclysmic uproars. I cannot, even now, escape the conviction that I've no respect for her, and a painfully inadequate supply of affection. For it was through her tutelage that I saw so many of my ambitions surrendered, so much independence subordinated. I still do not know what may be called mine, whether physical possessions or qualities of personality, and which must be called hers. She left no clues as to what remains to be fought for, nor what the reasons are for doing so. But I think it is likely, even at my age, that a woman of considerable means and no particular tethers to place nor family could find a suitable husband and learn the skills necessary to keep him. Mother said all adult living is duty. If there's no obvious one at the moment, you find one.
End.
gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this production of our virtual playhouse. We're going to invite Matt and one of the performers from the show, Dan, into the room for a talkback. But first, I wanted to make a brief announcement to our local theater community up here. As you may or may not know, one of our own was recently stricken with COVID. Tim Heistad, who has been here on our virtual stage in the past, back last year in Touched by War during the Kaplan Award-winning play that we presented virtually. It was actually our very first virtual production. He has never graced our main stage, but we were hoping to get him here. But he has been a fixture in our community as a director and as a performer. If you saw him in Catuit Center for the Arts, he appeared with me in Mice and Men, and also he was in Steve Ross's A Few Good Men. He's been on the stage and directed over at Falmouth Theater Guild, and he's just been around and has really been very close to our community. I am very happy to announce that as of today, they took him off the ventilator, and he is breathing on his own, and he is doing well, very, very well. And the entire Cape Cod theater community breathed a collective sigh of relief. And Tim, if you are watching, we are so glad to know that you are doing well and that you're doing better and that we're going to get you back up on these stages very, very soon. And for those of you who have not or were not aware, if anything, this is a great reason why you should all get yourselves vaccinated as well. Please, it's very important. Wash your hands, vaccinate yourself, keep wearing your masks until everybody else has gotten their vaccinations, and we will return ourselves to normal very, very quickly. I just received a message that Sarah is also in the audience here, so let me see. I am going to invite these folks into our room here as panelists. Let me see. Sarah, I don't see you. Can you text me so that I can see? Because it looks like, is it a different last name or is it a different name that you're appearing under? Let me see. Oh, let me see. All righty. So we are inviting these folks in to join us as panelists to the talkback. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube right now, there's not any real way for me to be able to take your questions and answers, but those of you who are in our regular room, you're welcome to post some questions in the chat, and we're happy to answer them. Guys, great show. That was really, really exciting to watch. I really enjoyed seeing it. I have a couple of questions, and I would love to have all of you talk a little bit about it. What was it like doing a show like this for the virtual stage? How did you navigate the pages? How did you navigate the dialogue? How did you navigate the scenes and the way it was edited? And feel free to jump in.
I'm sorry, I realized you didn't see me because my name was Daniel Abraham and I have no idea who that is.
My middle name is Abraham, so I sent Sarah the link that she used to
join.
Okay.
I was like, I use this every day. I don't know what that was. That was the weirdest thing ever. Anyway, I don't know. I'll talk. This was the second Zoom thing I did, and I've still been doing more, and I feel like every time you do it, like you just learn a little bit more about how to do it as well and cleanly as possible. We were like, okay, how do I set my eye line so it doesn't look like I'm reading? It looks like I'm looking at people, but I don't know, like I think we've all been in this for so long that I was like, okay, cool. These are people. I'm going to know them just as well as I can know them without physically being in a space with them. We had a good amount of rehearsals too. So I do feel like I got a chance to just be like, okay, you're my family for however many months we rehearsed this. But yeah, I think I don't know, unless you're like Meryl Streep, like this is like a constant, like trying to figure out how to do this the best way possible. And you know what? I bet you Meryl Streep wouldn't even be able to do it perfectly. It's confusing. There's lots of different things to work through.
It's funny you should mention Meryl Streep. She actually, when they broadcast Stephen Sondheim's birthday concert, and she did exactly that and had to learn just like you mentioned. It was a learning experience for her. She talked about it afterwards. They got on the cameras and they had no idea what they were doing, and they just recorded it and spliced it together. So I mean, you guys did a really great job.
I watched Julianne Moore do a reading, and I was like, she's reading off a page. I can tell if she can do it, I can do it.
How about you, Dan? What were your impressions?
Like Sarah, this wasn't the first Zoom performance I've done. Since we did Quakeress, I've done a musical, a Zoomsicle, if you will, and I mean, the experience never stops being foreign and strange. One thing that I do find that I enjoy about the Zoom performance as a venue is the relative intimacy, despite the fact that we are technically doing theater. The intimacy of the camera and of the sound. Listening to it, I was a little bummed that my sound quality on that recording isn't great, but it still affords you the luxury of performing on voice, but not in such a way that you have to project to fill any kind of a decent sized house. But yeah, like Sarah said, this is a really lovely group of people that it was really fun to become the family of.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Matt, you put together one heck of a cast, and I know they come from all over the place. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your process for choosing your cast, and what was it like being able to rehearse with people on different coasts and in different regions of the United States as you were putting this project together?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think Dan was the only one in a different time zone. He was 3 hours behind us, and so he was. We all appreciated his adaptability coming in.
Just to interrupt that, just when Dan first logged in, he's like, "So should I just log on at like 1:30?" And I'm like looking at my clock. I'm like, "It's like 4 PM, dude. Where are you?" And then I'm like, "Oh, that's right. He's LA. He's out on the West Coast." But
I am perennially 3 hours behind life, just constantly behind.
Right. Yeah. For us, I mean, we were all in there at pretty convenient times for us, after work or whatever. But Dan made the time in the middle of his afternoon to join us. I had actually done a small Zoom reading of a different play that Dan was a part of a few months ago, and so that's where I had first encountered him. Imogen, who isn't here right now, but who played Peggy, I had actually worked with once on Zoom, and also once in a live production of mine about a year ago. It was my first time working with Julia and with Sarah. Julia was actually recommended by a friend, and Sarah I did not know before this at all. I watched many audition tapes for the part of Helen, and she really sort of captured the attitude that I was looking for. And so it was, in a way, it was helpful to not really be restricted by location. Otherwise, Dan, for example, nobody's actually in this area except for one, Imogen's in nearby me. But the only way for this cast to come together would have been virtually. So that is one thing that was fortunate, and it did make some things logistically easier. People didn't have to drive to a rehearsal location. That was the last in-person show I worked on. That was one of the most time-consuming things, was making sure everybody could physically get to where they need to be on time, and paying for space is very, very expensive. So there are certain advantages that come along with the virtual platform.
I appreciate your bringing that up, because I think that is going to be part of the new reality that we're going to be dealing with. I don't know if we're going to be having rehearsals so much virtually for a very long, but I do think that, for me, it has made production meetings easier. It's made it much easier to meet with people as opposed to traveling. And there's so much time that you save where you're not on the road. I think you're going to see a lot of that. For the theater, for our theater, we've been producing every other week. We do the series of short tales that are read by actors locally, and we've sporadically done this virtual playhouse. However, this is the first of our relaunch, where we're actually going to be offering original works once a month, and we'll have an opportunity to revisit this in a few months as an encore performance as well. But it's a commitment that we're making at Eventide to really support the arts, especially with everything that has been going on. Cape Cod has a lot of wonderful playwrights and performers connected to it. And we are always looking to promote folks who have a Cape Cod connection. And Matt does have a Cape Cod connection. He has family here, and he comes up here and he enjoys the summers here. And we love to support. We love to support our own. And this is a great opportunity for us to bring new and fresh perspectives to the community. And I think that this medium is going to be continuing for a while. I really do. I think that the way, even with the vaccines and even with us returning to a sense of normalcy, the convenience of some of this types of programming is going to linger. And I think folks are going to enjoy these types of things, which is one of the reasons why we do this at 4 p.m. for us here on the East Coast, because it just works for people in their schedules. We've found that, if it's too late, people are either going out to do other things or they're doing other things with their family. If it's too early, they don't want to give up their day. But this is sort of a nice time to schedule an appointment to sit down by the fire with a glass of wine out on the deck if the weather's nice, and to enjoy some performances which you would not have an opportunity to see anywhere else. I'm curious. I kind of want to go around the group again. We talked about what the experience was like. How do you feel about the idea of this sort of medium continuing? And let's just go in the order we did before. I'd love, Sarah and then Dan and then Matt, I'd love to hear about your thoughts about continuing in this medium and whether or not this is something that you would like to do either casually or if you see this having more legs now that it's kind of gotten its footing.
I think I'm 50-50. I mean, I want to get back on a stage. I was walking through this city the other day and I was just like, I think I might weep the first time I get to stand on a stage again with other humans. But, as Matt said, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do this show if this were in person. I don't know that I would have been able, to get to where, wherever it's being done, which is the same, the other Zoom one I did was, I think it based from a company based in DC. These were great opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But because we're in what we're in, cool. I didn't know who Helen McGill-White was before. I'm a little obsessed with her now. So I don't want to see it go away entirely because I do think it offers a ton of flexible ways to see theater and do theater. But I mean, on the flip side of it, I'm just yeah, I'm ready to get on a stage and stare into somebody's eyes for real and be like, let's work off of each other, not through a camera.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's an interesting conversation. I agree with everything that Sarah said. I really can't wait to get back to work. I think that when we talk about the Zoom moment, the Zoom zeitgeist of art being performed in front of a webcam, I think audiences and performers alike are going to continue on thinking about this as being a very particular, it's a moment in our shared history that we're always going to all have a very specific relationship with. We didn't all decide to start doing Zoom plays because why the hell not? So our relationship to this kind of theater and this kind of performance is always going to carry this timestamp. And so I, as a person that I'm just interested in the history of performance, I'm excited to see how it continues to happen. I can't wait to do another play where I'm not just doing theater with people from another part of this country, but I want to do theater with people from all over the place where I'm forced to completely upend my sleep schedule and perform with people in Okinawa or something, someplace equally far away. I don't have any plans. If anybody knows anybody in Okinawa that's trying to hire an actor that looks like me, please give me a call. But
Matt, you got any plans to write anything that works like that?
Yeah, Matt, what's going on, man? Where's my next job?
I got a few things like that in the works. Don't worry.
But yeah, the spirit of collaboration lives strong in this art form, no matter its venue. So I doubt that this is going. I agree with you. I think this is going to stay for a long time. But I think that a lot of people share Sarah's sentiment of we want to be in the same actual space, and the meaning of being able to sit in a room shoulder to shoulder with a stranger breathing the same air as them, it's going to mean something very different. Yeah, so I'm curious about how all that works, but obviously I'm a complete and utter mercenary. You pay me, I'm doing it. Whatever it is, wherever you're paying me to perform is where I will be performing.
Excellent. Excellent. Matt, what are your thoughts about the future of this medium, and how has this given you an opportunity to kind of promote your work?
You know, certainly opportunities have come up because of the shift to virtual work that otherwise may not have been there. Having the time to get, you know, I've done a few different readings, been able to send materials out to some people so they can get a feel for some of my other works. Those kinds of opportunities have been helpful, and I appreciate those opportunities. I've also enjoyed seeing what artists have been able to accomplish in this time. Artists tend to be pretty adaptable, and it's been impressive and enjoyable to watch other Zoom productions. I don't see myself continuing on with any virtual work any longer than I absolutely have to. You know, I just don't think I'm built for it. I think that any success, I think we had a lot of success with this show, and I think that success is due entirely to the talent and innovation of the cast. I mean, you know, they were teaching me about the virtual backgrounds. They were the ideas for any sort of blocking we could do. It was coming from them, and you know, I loved the process and I loved working with them, but I don't feel like my particular talent lies in the virtual medium. And I would like to get back to the live stage for a few reasons, you know, some being that the things I tend to rely on in terms of bringing a cast together, in terms of direction style, it's very blocking heavy. And I felt a little bit out to sea in this process, not being able to orient the show on the stage, because it was written before COVID, and it was written, well, no, it wasn't written before COVID, but it was not written for a virtual platform. It was written for the stage, and not being able to orient characters around a physical space, that's something that I rely on to be able to know the work a little bit better, to be able to make those tweaks as we go. And so I did find that difficult. And I think I'll be very grateful when we can get back to that way of doing things, where the cast can come together in the same space. I think that helps push a show forward. And again, I think everybody did a phenomenal job, and it was as good as it could have been. But I definitely felt out of my element, and I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
It's actually a great segue into the first question we have from one of our audience members. And this is directed towards Sarah, and it's from Catherine. She said that Helen McGill was a very fascinating person. Was it difficult to inhabit the mindset of these characters, given the attitudes and the outlook on life, that their attitudes and outlook on life feel so out of step with what modern men and women view themselves, or view as each other?
Are they though? I think one of the things I said to Matt like early on was the writing in this was so beautiful, and it was so like I kind of looked when I first auditioned, I looked at the two monologues, and I was just like, I think I get her. I get this. And I think that has a lot to do with the writing. It's just so fluid and beautiful, and like it made sense to me. And her longing for like connection and people to acknowledge what she's done and who she is, like I don't think that's that foreign to what women and not women as well are dealing with today. And I certainly connected with that. So I wish I could say that it was like, oh, this is so hard to understand, but it wasn't for me. I was like, I get it. And then, you know, reading the scenes with Andrew, I was just like, okay, my current feminist is like really ready to punch you. Really, really, really hardcore ready to punch you. So I would say that would probably, she was, while they were yelling at each other, I felt she was far more reserved than I would have ever have been personally in that situation. But yeah, I just, she's someone that I felt connected to pretty easily and pretty quickly, which is why I'm still learning a lot about her, because I I don't know, there's a lot of similarities. So it was fun to explore all of that. I don't have a PhD in anything. I have a bachelor's degree. So in terms of that, the similarity is not there. But in terms of how she orients herself to the world and to other people, I connected pretty easily with that, actually.
But that's actually a great segue into the next question we got, which is one of our audience members, Frank, wants to know, Matt, what was your inspiration for the play? These characters were really interesting and dynamic. And I'd like to kind of piggyback on Frank's question and just, as Sarah said, the language was gorgeous. I was really, really impressed at how well you grasped the flow of conversation in writing these characters, because you really, really got a handle on the period language. If it wasn't necessarily period accurate, which I'm no expert, so I don't know if it was or not, but if in the writing it was or was not period accurate, you made it feel both contemporary, but at the same time using language, this very florid language, which really was evocative of the time period you were trying to convey. So I'm curious, where you found your inspiration to write like that, and where you found your inspiration for these characters.
I like to write pieces that take place around this time in history, it was actually I was working on a different play last summer that was set around the turn of the century, and one of my female characters is an academic and holds a PhD, and I sort of wondered to myself, is that what they would call that an advanced degree for a woman at that time? Could she plausibly have held a PhD? And so I looked into what is the history of female academics earning what we now call a PhD. And through that research, I happened upon Helen, who is credited as the first American woman to earn a PhD. And I read the Wikipedia page, and then the next day I ordered her biography. She just seemed to have an incredibly interesting life. And her biography was written by Glenn Altshuler, who is a professor at Cornell. And that biography was really the inspiration for writing the play. It was not only just fascinating and enlightening, but it made me want to look deeper into the lives of all these characters. And a large number of lines and even whole passages from the play come from diaries and letters written by the real people. The way I tried to get in the mindset of this type of language was to pick out those passages that I thought would be helpful to really put in the play, and then sort of just try to emulate it. And all of the most beautiful writing in the play is not from me. It's from the diaries of these real people. And so my job was easy. Glenn went through and he, that biography is full of diary entries, letters that were written, and the story kind of crafted itself around those. It's accurate in that Andrew was the ambassador to Germany. Helen did help him edit his work. A lot of those conversations, would have plausibly taken place. The relationship between Helen and Karen, and the relationship between Helen and Peggy are based on real relationships, and all of those relationships have quite a bit of documented, correspondence and diary entries related to them. And so sifting through that and finding the most compelling pieces, and then just building the world and building the situations around that is really how I approached it. But I have the real life counterparts of these characters to thank, because people don't keep diaries like they used to. People don't write letters like they used to, and that it's all so eloquent and gorgeous writing, and that's part of how I find myself lost in the worlds that can be built in this time period. So for me, that's how sort of I approach the language, was taking their real words first, and building situations around them, and then just trying to stay in that flow of language.
Can I jump on top of that?
Please.
The eloquence of the writing, especially in the passages that are borrowed from their actual correspondence, it kind of relates back to what Sarah was saying of, how frustratingly contemporary a lot of the thought processes in these characters is. I think the primary difference is that, so rarely do we have people that can, a character like Andrew is a product of his time. So he felt like it was his prerogative to say, it's your job to build the house. It's your job to basically be a bauble that I can present to my contemporaries to elevate my own status, like unambiguous, very clear. I think that a lot of people still think in directions like that. A lot of men are still conditioned to think of, having a wife for that purpose, but we rarely see people as plain spoken in their attitude towards, spousal obligation as characters like this, which makes it nice in a play like this to have somebody articulating those views so clearly. And it reminds us that we need to look for the subtler, better evolved, the guys who took philosophy classes and attended a couple of feminism workshops while they were in undergrad to better facilitate the acquisition of what would ultimately still represent to them the marital bauble. I think Andrew would be the Brent Kavanaugh of his time. Not to wear my politics too clearly on my sleeve, but he likes beer, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think as any good performers, any good artists are, the ability to translate that in a way for an audience to respond and react to is really key. And you guys did a fabulous job of that. And you took a vehicle which was able to, force us to kind of shine a mirror or reflect a mirror on our own society, which did exactly what you just said. It forces us to look at, where are we now? Where were we then? Where are we now? And has there been a big change? And I loved your answer to that question, Sarah. That have we? I'm like, oh, here we go. This is going to be good. And it was great. And it's very true. It's just, you should all be commended for a really insightful production, wonderful language, wonderful performance, and a really great translation, and for working in such a difficult, unique medium. I want to thank you guys very much for the opportunity to share this play with our audience here today. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are at home, again, shout out to Tim. I'm so glad that you are feeling better. Everybody here on the Cape feels just this great sigh of relief, and we're so glad to see you back in action, and we're going to get you back out here soon. Next week, we are going to be back with our regular program, Eventide Tales. We'll be doing a little bit of a variation on that because April is National Poetry Month. So we are going to have a special guest host for Eventide Tales who's going to lead us in a repertoire of famous New England poets who are going to present a bunch of different poetry and prose that we're going to share with you, and maybe something a little more creative later on. We'll return back to the regular format come May. We will be offering an encore performance of this show tomorrow, both on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook channel, so you'll be able to view it there as a premiere. We'll be airing the recording of this, and we encourage you to continue to stay tuned to what Eventide is doing. We have a great season coming up. We are, for those of you who do not know, Eventide Theater has committed to presenting our season this year. We will not cancel any shows. We will not cancel any performances. Those performances may take on different forms. Our first two shows, Teacher of the Year, is actually a show that was written for the virtual format. It's currently in production. It's written and directed by Jim Daglish, and it's going to be great. We're producing that in partnership with the Katuitt Center for the Arts. Our second show, Twain by the Tail, is going to be a great green screen production, directed and starring our fabulous Twain interpreter, Stephen Rourke, and a wonderful cast that he's assembled for a variety of Mark Twain short stories. And then we'll be returning to the stage, hopefully in the fall, with The Last 5 Years, followed by Rich Orloff's Ha. So stay tuned. We've got some great stuff coming. We're going to have some more new exciting announcements as we go along. I'm looking forward to revisiting some more material with Matt, because he's got quite a repertoire, and he and I have been chatting, and I'd love to do some more stuff with you. And guys, great. Thank you so much. You guys were wonderful today, and I loved being able to host you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.